as you know, my LSAT prep kind of went from, okay, I'm going to do it in this amount of time to, okay, it might take a little bit longer. And all right, why not just get really interested in the LSAT? We're going to be here for, I think like a 6-month true focus is what ended up happening with me. I went in and out for a year, just different hardships coming up. And right now I'm aiming for January.
Nice. Well, I've really noticed how powerful you've showed up in class, in the courses, to the point where you're really systemizing your study process, which I think is key. You are getting interested in a way. That's the secret weapon.
I completely agree. I'm like, as somebody who's really only had my own experience with the LSAT, when I flipped the switch, and it was actually a friend of mine who pointed out to me that by trying to almost, maybe somebody out there will relate to this, like emotionally trying to solve all my life's problems by saying, if I just take the LSAT and I just get into law school, like I just have to do this. And I sort of had tunnel vision with it, which was actually distracting. It's actually distracting. It's really hard to intake a lot of the information that the LSAT is testing you on when you have this tunnel vision or of like, it's this or else. So when I broke down that barrier for me and I started systematizing my studying process, it actually took the pressure off of me. I just heard you with another student recently where you challenged her to get 100 questions wrong. And I was like, yeah. And it's so funny because I think the initial version of myself would have panicked. Like, who has time for that? Oh my God, that's going to take so much time. But leaning into the process and breaking things apart has helped more. And you know what else has really helped has been the wrong answer tracking sheet. And I've heard people on study calls with me, they say, that sounds really negative. Like, I can't be that negative. Like, that just sounds like, why am I putting that kind of pressure on myself? But I just want to take a second to almost shout out my own wrong answer tracking sheet. I've been keeping up with it for about 2 months now. And, sometimes when you're studying for the LSAT, depending on where you're at in life, your brain just turns into mush. And I know that my brain was turning into mush. I was like, can't tell if I'm being lazy. Like, I can't tell the difference between lazy and taking time off. And it was last Friday, I went through 20 sufficient assumption questions and I was doing different things. And when I went back to look at my tracking sheet, I realized that over the span, I think it was exactly 5 weeks, that just this huge jump happened in 5 weeks. And that made me walk in my weekend feeling a lot better. Whereas if I didn't have that tracking sheet, I would be like, I think I'm doing well. Like, I don't know, like, it seems like I'm doing well, but it's hard to see where you're coming from without you have that. So yeah, you're totally spot on. By sort of like almost like outsourcing my process to a system has taken the load off of it, made it not so personal.
Exactly. Otherwise, you're just living in the emotion of getting the questions wrong whenever it happens. But if you have those metrics, if you're tracking it, you can have your initial baseline and then see how much you've improved, where maybe it takes you longer to get 100 questions wrong because you're getting more of them right overall in the total set of what you're doing. Or maybe the ones you're getting wrong are becoming less of the easier ones and more of the tougher ones where a lot of people are going to get them wrong. And again, like I said in that other coaching call, every question you get wrong is a chance to learn something new. If you're only getting things right, it means the problems that you're trying are not difficult enough.
Yeah, I love what you point out about like some questions are genuinely just difficult. And, when you stick to that systemized, when I stick to the systemized process, I'm not worrying, am I too dumb to get this? It's just pulling that out. But speaking of the emotional roller coaster, something else that I sort of was noticing in my own studying, especially early on, is that sort of like emotional like rise, like feeling a holding my breath sensation when I was going to check the answer sheet. And I was like, wait a second, just setting myself up, no matter what, you get it right, there's an emotional crash. You get it wrong, there's an emotional crash. And it's so hard. I'm like, how can I move forward from this? Like, this is not productive, And so as soon as I started to feel myself building that up, that hold my breath sensation, I started to get really curious, like, how can I manage that in a healthier way? And that's when I got that's when I started to say, instead of like, I'm reading it. I'm like, how do I, and just kind of like jumping in the water and hoping I remember how to swim, like actively sticking to strategy. And that's something that really helped me out too. I was reading textbooks and watching your videos. And then of course you're like, okay, I got it. And you're trying to do it. But there almost is this middle spot of like every single time I'm working on that question, I am relentlessly sticking to a strategy. I will not let my brain say, well, I kind of feel like this, because I'm hoping to slide into that moment, right? Like I don't want to always stay in this strategy way. And by the way, sticking to this sort of really mental discipline of like, I'm not going to go off of feeling, I'm going to go off of exactly why I think this is the right answer, and really sticking with my answer. No emotional roller coaster of I hope it's right, hope it's wrong. It's like, this is why I think it's right. Really took away the emotional roller coaster. That being said, physically I am exhausted. I remember earlier on in my prep, I read a blog post of yours and you talked about like, don't try to carry on other parts of your life. And I was really upset by that post. And I reached out to I reached out to a friend and I'm like, I don't want to lose myself. I'm close to 30 years old. And I'm like, I just spent 10 years trying to sort of create a something for myself. And I don't want to lose myself. I need to keep my working out. I need to keep this. And I sort of talked it out with my friend. And now that I've been able to emotionally rearrange, it sounds so cliche, but I understand what sacrifice means. Because and the blog post was right, is what I'm trying to say. Because once I've taken on the LSAT of this is really what I'm doing, and no longer crossing my fingers of like I hope this works out, but taking the time and saying like, I don't hope I get this right. This is why I'm answering it like this. And then I get to work from there. It's so physically exhausting that socially I'm like totally on a 0 scale to 110. Social, I feel socially sick. Sometimes I call it my social sickness, and but then of course it's all temporary. But I've really been learning what the feeling of sacrifice is as well throughout this journey, and I'm exhausted, but the emotional roller coaster is no longer there, which has been able to push my progress more.
Nice. Well, single-minded focus, I think, is really important to mastering this. Just to clarify, though, in that blog post I wrote about, like, I was talking about not taking on new difficult projects. Like, I wouldn't try to learn to ride a unicycle 10 hours a day while also trying to study the LSAT 10 hours a day. COVID already gets in the way of socializing to some extent. So if you're hitting the LSAT study room every night in the course to hit the books and get in that study group, that's great. But balance is important too. I mean, you're going at this, as you said, like for 6 months, right? So from like July to January, this is your life. This is your number one thing. Mm-hmm. I don't want you to burn out though. So make sure that you're maintaining some balance and staying healthy. If you want to exercise, do it. I think it can only help.
Great. I love that. Yeah. Very good points in terms of like, we're all sort of in a very hyper specific moment right now, which is just taking a lot of emotional management. And actually, I would say that the number one, obviously your course has been a life changer, really a life changer. I'm clearly self-motivated and able to self-manage really well, which I thought made me a really good candidate for 100% self-study. I'm also financially scrapped, which meant I was like, okay, I'm doing independent study. Like I have to do this. And, that sort of feeling of I have to do this because I can. I was also talking about this with a friend of mine lately. When I joined your courses, I didn't realize that the actual most important process of my success has been the sense of community through your courses. For example, when we meet a few times a week, after a first few weeks, I sort of like got my own little crew. And we meet separately up to 3 times a week. And within those crews, sometimes we can spend 3 hours working on one problem, but we can also spend, an hour. If you spend 1 hour a week saying, this week has been really hard, and almost like a therapeutic study, like you're the only people in the world that know what I'm going through right now. I think you bring up a really good point of balancing, and that's something that your course has brought me that I did not foresee. I was like, I got this, but the little crew that I got from the course has actually been a lifesaver.
That's really awesome to hear. I love that. And especially during COVID times now, that's really more important than ever. But always over the course of my whole career, I'd be getting emails from people all over the world who all feel like they're going through this alone. And I'm encountering nothing but LSAT people every day. So to me, it's like, why would you feel like you're alone? There's like thousands of people, tens of thousands of people. But it's been really cool that now that Zoom video and study groups have become the new norm. It's like online connections. I love that you've come together and formed those bonds with others who are going through this process, not just for the LSAT, but also for applications, for the whole law school journey and just life itself. I think that's fantastic. I'm glad you've been doing that.
Yeah, it is really fantastic. It's so ironic that you're getting all those emails and you get those messages. It really is a very isolating feeling. It's very lonely. And that's, I think, where the sacrifice comes from for me. But there's also something we said that I didn't really realize, which is that when I was meeting with study groups outside and trying to sort of form that community, but it was through your courses that it really stuck. And these people, we say that we're meeting, we meet. And maybe it's because we're financially invested with your course, even a little bit. Maybe some of us are on scholarship with your course, which I know that you have. But no matter what, it's like once we all took that action step where we're in your courses, that is what I found stuck in terms of the community. We're all in this. We're really, really in it to win it. But that being said, I do have this one question for you in terms of what's sort of been coming up for me. All right. So through listening to your course, something that's really great about it is that there are students in it that are all at different parts of their process. And almost like a little girl that's hearing her older siblings talk about how scary middle school is. I'm hearing just people say that when you're studying and you're learning the theory, when you get to the 70s and 80s, this thing happens where maybe the writing style is different. And they're talking about on the game section, the 80s change. And I'm hearing on the logical reasoning section, it starts to creep up in the 70s. And so I'm getting these messages that it's almost like it's spooky, like you're going to feel this drop. And part of me wants to protect myself from the drop. Of course, I want to be as well armored as I can be. And so I think as long as I learn the theory and I'm not going forward with that cross my fingers, I know how to do this. If I can really get a good idea of theory and my strategy and why those work, and then even attach my own personal strengths into it and have this way that's going to work for me, I might be able to protect myself against a spooky thing that happens with the 70s and 80s. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it and whether it is theory or whether there's another skill set, or maybe it's just like, I got to just jump in the pool. It's going to feel weird. And that's it.
I think that last thing you said is spot on. So just do it. Like the 70s and 80s feel mysterious. They feel spooky. Maybe you haven't done any of them yet. Just do a couple. I mean, if we talk about test 70 to 89, that's what, 20 exams? That's plenty. So if you want to do one or two just to see what it's like and jump in head first a little bit, like you can do that. There will still be plenty of others you can save for later. I think the exam has evolved to get tougher over time. There's nothing special about that, though. It just means that there's more tough questions, or the bar has been raised a little bit. And so what was a level 2 question is now a level 1 question. And what was a level 6 question, which didn't even exist, is now level 5. So they've boosted it up a bit. But you've got all these previous exams to study, and you've done the work. You're not the little girl just starting out anymore. You've been at this for a while already. And based on your presentation that I saw last week in class, like you're definitely not a beginner anymore. You've put in the work, you've grown. And now there are others looking up to you. I know that. I've heard from them. You're guiding others, which is fantastic. I love that community that builds, and the fact that you've been organizing and getting together with others. Like you can explain things to help others along. So own that. Like you've got this.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I did recognize at the end of my presentation that my inbox filled up asking to be my study buddy. And to be completely honest, the first thing that happened to me was like, you know the feeling. And but that's where systematizing really helps. And that's what something that, you know, whether somebody believes in astrology, whatever, you know, I'm an Aquarius, which my natural sense is not a system. So leaning into the system has really been really great. But I love to hear you just remind me that there are 20 practice tests between 70 and 90, because of course I'm like, no, again, since it's October 5th today, and we're at the beginning of October, and I'm not taking the test till January. So the 20 practice tests that you're talking about, was sort of afraid of them. Like, I can't open that closet just yet. But you're so awesome. And I love the point you bring up about just do a few and take the spooky middle school. Like, I feel like I'm going into middle school next year, and I'm like, someone just please tell me, what is it like? But nobody can really tell you what it's like. And I made it out of middle school just fine. So yeah.
Yeah. It's tough in the moment, but we all get out in the end. And then the other thing I'll say is the system is really important. And in part, it's most important on the tougher questions. A lot of times students will get the easy questions right just through intuition, just through aptitude alone, because there aren't as many tricks there. But on those tougher questions, that's where you've really got to have the system in place, because your guesses, your pre-phrases may not be enough to carry you there. And like you've seen with certain question types, like sufficient assumption, there are actually formulas underlying the questions. And maybe again, on some of those easier sufficient assumptions, you'll get it right just through your own understanding, just through your own intuition. But on the tougher ones, diagramming can be really useful, not to always draw it out, but to at least to understand the underlying conditional logic there.
Yeah. And I actually, on our last call, I had been having trouble with diagramming, and like, I don't want to say in a fast way, because that doesn't really like holistically talk about the issue there, but reading a long stimulus and figuring out what is the most important part to diagram was coming up. But you actually helped me out with that a ton by mentioning, like, just find which parts don't overlap, which parts are overlapping, which parts are not overlapping. So I've strengthened that skill. But yeah, this has been a really great call. The biggest fear of mine has been those 70s, 80s. And you really answered that. So that's been pretty helpful. Thank you.
My pleasure, Alyssa. Fantastic. It's been great to connect with you again, as always. And I'll see you in class soon.
Okay, great. Have a good one.
You too. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.